CS2. Reaching peaks of almost 2 million players throughout its 12-year-plus lifespan, the game shows no signs of slowing down. But maybe it should. Before it was Counter-Strike 2, the game was known as Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and it was created as a sequel to Counter-Strike Source, which itself was a remake of the gaming phenomenon now known as Counter-Strike 1.6. Back then, it was simple. Boot up the game, pick a server, select your team, and choose a faction. In the days of old, Counter-Strike was about the everlasting clash between terrorists and counter-terrorist units. When Counter-Strike released in the early 2000s, the game was very focused on capturing the feeling of stopping a terrorist threat, or perpetrating one yourself, and the developers weren't shy on the details. While you could play as factions on maps where it didn't make sense for them to exist, such as Arctic Avengers on desert maps, CS 1.6 gave players a lot of say in how they took on the game's controversial premise. Fast forward to the year 2011, I don't know why I said it like that, and Counter-Strike, along with its remake, are receiving a proper sequel, built on Valve's powerful and completely stable Source. The very next year, Counter-Strike Global Offensive releases on Valve's own Steam Gamefront, priced at just $15. $15? On launch? And the game stayed at that price point until they went free to play, in 2018. If only we could go back. Anyways, to many, CSGO was an improvement on CS 1.6's, well, everything. Breathtaking maps with beautiful details and more complex environments, weapons that pack more of a punch, you actually couldn't see through smokes this time, everything sounded better, kinda, and to top everything off, Counter-Strike finally had official servers, which meant proper matchmaking could be set in stone. This allowed for more officially implemented game modes, but most importantly meant that the developers could focus on the competitive aspect of the game and make sure it was difficult to master, yet fun to play. And how do you make a competitive game fun? One way is to give players good maps. Let's circle back to what I said earlier. Now, you read the title, I'm not here to yap about map design for minutes on end. I want to tell you about my favorite part of CSGO's maps that has slowly and sadly been abandoned over the years. Map-based factions. Remember the factions that I mentioned during the 1.6 bit? In CSGO, they're back. They're sexy, and they are no longer a fashion option. Instead of picking which faction to play as every time you load in, Valve shaved off a step, choosing to decide players' factions by the map they're playing on. This sweet detail makes the game feel a little more realistic and gives each map life and character. Some maps may reuse factions, but there's so much variety in both map setting and variation of factions that everything makes sense and doesn't feel overdone. Returning factions from the original games include the Elite Crew, the Phoenix Connection, which is arguably Counter-Strike's most recognizable and important faction on the terrorist side, and the GIGN, GSG-9, British SAS, and SEAL Team 6 for the counter-terrorist side. The game also added some new factions as well. The Anarchists, which are my personal favorites, the Balkans, Somalian Pirates, the Professionals, and the Separatists for T-side, and the FBI, who eventually got a complete remake similar to the SAS and Elite Crew, the IDF, and the American SWAT. Throughout most of CSGO's lifetime, these factions were used to immerse players in the game's gorgeous new maps and map remakes, and not only do they have their own homely environments, they also all have their own unique personalities. In earlier renditions of Counter-Strike, the T-side and CT side all used the same voice lines. But when CSGO came out, the one-take, oh shit, we gotta put in some voices real quick voice lines were replaced with professionally acted and recorded voice lines for each individual faction. Not each side, each faction actually had their own voices and distinct phrases. These range from the American factions and
be careful, let's all make it home tonight.
To the Middle Eastern factions
I need help here!
And
goodbye, my friends.
To the British factions
Bingo, bango, bongo.
And
sneaky beaky like.
All of these lines of dialogue are voiced by a different person for most factions, lending authenticity to the root location of these factions. They also all have their own styles of speaking, whether it be the bold, impulsive words of the Anarchists reflecting their desperate want to take the world back for themselves by blowing shit up and taking office workers hostage.
I know how much you hate them, so let's do this.
Or the SWAT's passion for defending their home, and of course that classic American hustle.
Time to earn our stories.
I think my favorite use of these characters was CSGO's legendary cinematic trailer. I love these guys, and they really helped solidify Counter-Strike's legitimacy when it came to representing real-world heroes and terrorist threats. Unfortunately, this legitimacy would not last forever. In 2016, the SAS faction was updated to look less shit. This was a good change, but what it led to was, in my opinion, a little disappointing. Not long after this, the League crew got a facelift along with their Home of Dust 2, and then the FBI were updated and took the place of the SEAL Team 6 on Nuke, when the MP5 got added to competitive. Things were looking great for factions for about another year, until Valve released Operation Shattered Web in November of 2019. With all the new shit added for this operation, the standouts were the agent skins. This is the exact moment that the devs threw map immersion out the window, all in the name of another product to sell players. Now listen, I'm not saying agent skins were the worst thing to happen to Counter-Strike, but if you want to know how much Valve cared about the game when implementing these things, it took some analytical players finding out that lots of agent hitboxes were smaller than others 3 years later for Valve to come around and make things consistent. And even then, Valve left these hitboxes broken until CS2 came out a year after the discovery, and only then did they give every single model in the game the same hitbox. And it only got worse for the joy and whimsy of map-based factions from here, as upon CS2's limited release, as they like to call it, all maps featured the Phoenix connection for T-side, and the SAS for CT side. Heavily geared British dudes sporting gas masks in the middle of a hot desert? Yeah, make that make sense. I'm not normally the type to be all like,
where's the immersion?
but all the fun I had putting myself in the shoes of a bombastic crew of bank robbers is gone now. Rest in peace, bank. You can make the argument that Valve changed this because CSGO is shaping up to be more and more competitive lately, and they wanted CTs and Ts to be the same on every map for the sake of recognizability, but if that was true, they would never have added agents. Call me a skeptic if you want, but I feel it was done because everybody was upset they weren't getting CS2, and the devs chose to gloss over factions altogether to save time and resources. I completely understand why they'd want to remove certain factions like the IDF, as to avoid controversy, but it still sucks that I don't get to play as swagged out anarchists on Office anymore. Now everybody's stuck playing the most vague terrorist organization in the world. I don't even know where these fuckers are supposed to be from. They still look pretty sweet though. Don't get it twisted, I do not hate agent skins. I own 2 dripped out goobers myself. I just hate that ultimately they took my sweet sweet anarchist boys away. The only thing we can do now is get it trending on Twitter. Hashtag bring anarchy back to CS2.
You fucking bastard!
Alright, that's all I got for ya. Later.